what what are what are your thoughts on what, let's just say, IMBs and local loan officers need to do to remain relevant and to thrive going forward in 2025? What are some of the changes you think need to happen in the industry?
Yeah, well, I think for IMBs as we go forward, I mean, my prediction how it's going to play out is it's going to kind of hollow out the middle. I think that, the big IMBs, certainly the big public ones, are going to continue to try to grow and scale for all the obvious reasons. Largely at the extent of the middle of the mortgage industry. A lot of the small is gone. I do think that opens up a lot of opportunity for the small and nimble as we go into this, looking forward environment where you're going to have banks, credit unions, don't market as well on the whole. And these big IMBs that are big, large organizations that, there's a lot of bad that goes along with the good, being that size as well. So, in the IMB space, I think that there's a lot of opportunity for small, nimble, hyper local. The big will continue to get bigger. How successful each, you know, all the companies will be in each of those classes. And, on the big side, how effectively can you scale tech and processes to save costs, to, inject into the organization in other ways. And the small guys, it will just be really being creative, incredible marketing, nimble, just owning your local communities, and being really, really engaged and immersed in person and digitally. So,
Cool, cool. And then why did you take on this leadership role of in the state of Ohio? What was your why taking that role?
I'm a super proud Ohioan. I've been involved with the Ohio MBA really my whole career. Did 5 years on the board just before the pandemic. Have stayed involved and engaged, and I've kind of watched it, not make progress the last few years. And it's nothing I was kind of looking for, that their board decided to make a move with the old executive director. And, somehow my name got floated. They kind of ran it past me. And yeah, I mean, after learning a little bit more, I know the president, I know the board. The interim director I've been working with is a mentor of mine and a great friend. And I just think there's great promise in the role. I think that, like we were talking about earlier, state MBAs have really just kind of gone down the tubes and missed the mark. I mean, your average state MBA conference, it's going to be 100 people. You got your board members and vendors and some hanger-oners and some LOs, and I just think that it doesn't have to be that way. And that, you can do some incredible things on the state level. It just requires some creativity, ingenuity. And in my experience, I've been connecting with a lot of executive directors around the country. Some are phenomenal, but I would say the vast majority don't give a crap. They've been in the role for a long time. They're making money doing it. The board continually revolves and it's not busting their chops. And, that's what I've seen at least, is you just have a lot of, content, latent executive directors. So I'm going to definitely take a different approach with Ohio. So,
So one of the things that I've been saying a lot, and I think it's intuitively obvious that if you're local, you need to win locally and you need to win your database. And I look at some of the state boards that I've attended that have pretty vibrant communities. I mean, Colorado, vibrant, community, Seattle, Washington, vibrant. And they also have some of the best loan officers. So what are you going to do to help have a vibrant MBA, state? And what are you going to do to help add value to the loan officers and the executives in those states? I would just love to hear your thoughts on that.
yeah, I mean, at the top, the annual conference, right, has to be bigger, better, more value rich, and, lenders wanting to attend, which is going to lenders bring everything with them to these conferences. So important to create an agenda and market it properly that's going to get lenders there. That's, I think, the big thing. Separate from that, I don't think we've done a good enough job in Ohio either. Just, marketing, talking about the advocacy wins that we've had here in the state, the last couple of years. So I think socializing that more. But then to really deliver value on a go forward basis, um, virtual networking and education. I mean, it's, when I was running the Mortgage Collaborative, we were doing 15 to 20 sessions a month. I mean, almost one a business day. At one point, we were one a business day. Working groups of like industry professionals, webinars and educational sessions on pertinent issues, leaning on your board and your sponsor partners to help, drive some of the content in this space and, just creating, more virtual opportunities for if it's an LO or a loan processor or a loan originator or a CEO or a decision maker. Through virtual education and networking events, also some local networking stuff. I remember when I was involved with the OMBA in the past, they did, some really nice like, you know, local just networking sessions. One in Toledo, one in Cleveland, one in Columbus, one in Dayton. So getting people in person. So I think it's going to start there, and then I have some ideas, beyond that as well. So.
Well, I've always considered you, given the role you had at the collaborative, and just you're like a master networker. You know how to create collaborative events that create value for people, and then following you lately. I mean, I get feeling like being a mentor, being a connector, being someone that just creates communities is it's what gives you joy, and you're really good at it. What are some of the, I don't know, either the values you have or some of the things that you do to create that type of local connection? I would just love to hear you describe that.
I mean, it's kind of rooted in the way that just I came into the industry. I didn't go to college. I got into cap markets when I was 19 years old. And like my mindset immediately was like, listen, I don't have college. I am going to have to outwork and outlearn everybody, to kind of get where I want to go. And I leaned in heavily to networking. I mean, I soaked it up. At a very young age in the cap market space, really made it a priority to meet as many other professionals that did what I did across America to learn from them. Then I started going to the MBA National Secondary Conference in my early 20s. I made, those connections got strengthened through just in-person relationships. I got really involved with Lenders One, the competitor to the company I ran, where I was a heavily, heavily engaged lender member. I ran like their bank and credit union like networking group. The MBA asked me to run their community bank networking group like 10 years ago or so. So I did that for some years. So I just saw the value I got out of it personally. Um, and just far beyond like anything else I was doing in my career to try to enrich myself or to perform better in my job. I just found like, hey, talking with other pay it forward people that do what I do to exchange notes just had so much value to me. So those are really the values that, you know, I took into the role with the Mortgage Collaborative, and then, on a smaller level, we'll look to do with the OMBA. So.
Cool, cool. So from a leadership perspective, there's things that are new about leadership, and then there's things that are just, it was true 100 years ago, it's true today. Are there anything that you think of that's new about leadership, call it modern, and one thing that is, it's still just as important as ever? What comes to mind?
Yeah, I think, on the new side of things, I mean, we're just in a more remote world where, I built the Mortgage Collaborative with an entirely remote staff. Um, and, people working at different times around different things going on in their lives. I mean, I just think to me, like embracing that and really just encouraging people to work at the times and terms that work best with their lives, and everything else that goes along with that in this emerging day and age. The way you communicate with people, more Zoom calls and less in-person stuff, and so I think just really understanding that if you're not in person, um, that it's a little trickier. Finding the right people is the most important part, but you can have incredible culture at completely virtual organizations. So, I think that to me, that's something I've always looked at as like a new age element of leadership that I've really tried to embrace and get the most out of. On the flip side, I think that, things that have kind of withstood the test of time in terms of leadership. Um, I think the biggest one to me is just, when I was earlier in my career, I felt like if I had, it would have driven me crazy to manage an all remote staff when I was working for banks in my mid 30s. I was just too like on people and I just kind of realized the value of setting the tone from the top, communicating really effectively, being always open, honest, authentic, and transparent with people. And then what happens is, they want to produce better results for you. So, what I found is that, throughout time, regardless of all the evolution, that, the more you treat employees like you work for them, as opposed to them working for you, you get better effort and you get better results. So,
Servant leadership hasn't changed. And then LinkedIn, LinkedIn leadership is a thing. You're very active on LinkedIn. You're very active at creating leadership content from a social media perspective. So that is new, in which anybody can be a leader and jump on LinkedIn, create videos like the one you and I are creating right now, and create impact in leadership. So I mean, to me, there's a lot of things that are new, but that's one of the biggest.
it's part of like the new age communication strategy, that I was kind of alluding to earlier, right? I mean, I would do that all the time. Like, when I was running the collaborative, I'll use it with organizations I'm running now. And by talking about values and things that are important to me and I feel like are important to organizations I'm running, your people are seeing, reading that. So it's a good way to set the tone. And yeah, I'm biased, obviously, but I would agree. Like LinkedIn has become, I tell people now, if, like people in our industry without a LinkedIn strategy, it's like trying to fight somebody with, your dominant hand tied behind your back, honestly. So,
Yeah, it's funny. I do walk and talks. Well, I walk every morning at sunrise, whether I'm by myself, and if I'm at an event, I try to have someone. But I recently got introduced to a guy who's the current active duty SEAL team leader for SEAL Team 6,
oh no way.
Dev Crew, and he got in the SEALs in 2008. And I asked him the same question I just asked you. I go, hey, what's new about leadership? I mean, I think the iPhone came out in 2007. So like literally you got in the SEALs as the iPhone was being introduced. And then here you are now running, Dev Crew. And he said, You're gonna love this." He goes, "Well, what's new is drones." He's like, like you see in the movies that SEALs are like
Mm-hmm.
connected with walkie-talkies and we're talking to each other. And he's like, there's a lot of missions that we go on, no Garmin watch,
Mm-hmm.
no nothing electric, because that's how a
Picked
drone
up.
can be picked up and deployed. So he's like, that's different.
Huge.
And requires more rehearsal, requires more planning, requires a different level of skills, preparation, and leadership. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. Here we are in an era where technology is prolific,
Mm-hmm.
but yet sometimes SEAL teams have no technology.
None.
Uh,
Zero. Huh?
yeah, well, I mean, they do have guns, and and
Mhm.
and he and he did say we can still use our infrared goggles. So the night vision is still in play. That drones don't pick that up. He said, I go, what's what's never changed? And he's like, leadership by example.
Mm-hmm.
He goes, leadership example was important then. And he's like, and I would say now it's even more important because there's such a skepticism of distrust. And there's so many people that are like one way on social media and then who they are. So he's like, leadership by example is more important, but it's always been important. Anyways, I thought that was pretty cool.